The Ashley Book of Knots Challenge is officially starting off with Chapter 1, titled On Knots. Before getting into the instructions on knot tying, Ashley gives some brief history on knots and the sailor's significant contribution to this area. His passion for knot tying is clearly evident, and there's a lot of things I can mention from these first few pages, but I want to delve into the more practical aspects. One thing I want to mention, though, is Ashley's purpose for this book. In this chapter, he writes, "The basis of this work is the assembled notes of 40 years' collection. My aim has been to write a comprehensive and orderly book on applied knots and to make whatever information it contains easily accessible." He then goes into the topic of knot names. I appreciate this part of the book, as one thing about knot tying that has frustrated me is how some knots are referred to by several different names. Ashley mentions how giving the right name to each knot was perhaps his most difficult task. He gave preference to names that he heard used by sailors, sailmakers, and riggers. He did his research and compared names to other sources as well. Some knots have several names based upon their application, which brings us to the first numbered entries in this book, the sheet bend and the weaver's knot. Ashley notes that both of these knots are structurally identical, but they are tied using different methods and material. The sheet bend is tied with a rope, and the weaver's knot is tied with yarn or string. Ashley mentions how much of the confusion on knot names can be traced back to an 1866 book called The Book of Knots. This book was published under the pseudonym of Tom Bowling. Many of the knot names used in Bowling's book appear to have been taken from French manuscripts. This resulted in literal translation of the French knot names. Some of Ashley's complaints against his considered source book for knot tying include errors present in the knot drawings, inclusion of only 8 English sailor names for knots, and the lack of common names such as the overhand and figure 8 knot. Numbered entries 3 through 10 show the differences between the common English name for knots and the ones used by Bowling. For entry number 11, Ashley mentions how Bowling uses several different names for the clove hitch, including waterman's knot, simple fastening in a rope, lark's head crossed, and builder's knot. The names used by Bowling ended up being used in many other publications, so they spread and became common. It's interesting to note that Ashley never found a sailor who knew the names used in Bowling's book. So we can see that a knot may have several different names due to its application and method of tying, but also from adopting names that have been introduced and used by others. In the next video, I'll continue on with Chapter 1, learning more about knot terminology.